Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover Warren 20 here. And you know the saying when there's a movie that comes out, you're not too hyped for it, but then when you see it, you automatically love it. Everyone automatically loves it. It makes so much money at the box office, and it goes on to be one of the best films that year. And you're like, I can't wait for them to make a sequel because I'd love to see another movie and this become a franchise. So, Hollywood clearly listens to people saying that. They see all the money figures, and the movie makes so much money. Time for a sequel. So they go, and they make a sequel. They establish some kind of secret plot that the protagonists of the previous movie never knew. They go, and they make it, and then they rush it sometimes even, and then they release it, and then you get hyped for it. You rush to the theater opening night, and then you come out like, well, man, that wasn't even that great. Now I wish they hadn't made a sequel. But Hollywood doesn't care. It'll make more money than the first one, and then they'll go make a third film. An even worse third film. You're like, that's it. This franchise is dead. Yeah. So, this list is going to be for the top 11 movies that should have never, ever had a sequel. And some of these are going to be horror films, and some of these picks may be a little bit controversial, because there may be some who actually do like these sequels that certain horror film I'm talking about got, but it's all just my opinion. So just try to let it happen. So, let's get on with the list. Starting at number 11, it will be a horror film. And yes, this is going to be one of those controversial picks I'm going to be telling you guys. Yeah, number 11 for a film that should have never had a sequel, The Devil's Rejects. Yeah, I know, I'm going to get a little backlash for saying that, but guys, there's a saying, when some characters die at the end of a certain film, just leave them dead if they're only human beings. Yeah, so let's recap this. This technically is somewhat of a sequel, not really, but it's a sequel to a horror film called House of a Thousand Corpses, Rob Zombie's first feature film. It was good throwback to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Just think like Texas Chainsaw Massacre set on Halloween night. Just basically put in Leatherface, and you've got a way better Texas Chainsaw remake than the actual 2003 remake. Think of it like that. It wasn't really profitable at the box office, per se, but it did gain a cult following among horror fans and gained some better reception on some home media sales, so that pretty much inspired Rob Zombie to go make a kind of follow-up with a bit of a different tone with his Firefly family. The villains in the Thousand Corpses, except now, they are now the main characters of the story. So I kind of liked, which is why I liked this movie a lot better than House of a Thousand Corpses. It does something with the horror villains. Just like, okay, since your protagonist in Thousand Corpses died, why don't you just make the horror villains the main characters this time around? And have them trying to get away from the cops. Yeah, because the end of the previous movie pretty much now made them wanted by police officers, and one of the police officers they murder's brother is coming after them, and he does not plan on taking any of them alive. He manages to capture and murder the whole family, except for the two children of the family, Otis and baby Firefly, who escape, and they go to rendezvous with Captain Spaulding, and they set off on the road to try to get away from the cops as quickly as possible, while murdering victims and torturing them along the way. Or any victims they encounter. That's pretty much the plot of this movie. And I think it's even better, and honestly, this movie had a phenomenal ending. Because they somewhat do try to get away, but they do get brutally tortured by John Waddell, which is pretty fucking satisfying because I don't sympathize with these characters. They deserved every bit of torture they got in this movie, and it was pretty epic to see them get the shit beat out of them by John Waddell, especially Otis the most. I think seeing Otis get the crap kicked out of him was the best. So they get on the road, nearly dead, but they don't even get that far because there's already a police barricade waiting for them, and so they drive through the barricade and they get shot to pieces. The end. While Freebird plays. And so Rob decided, okay, my family died. Okay, the Firefly family died of rejects. I'll go make other original films and just move on to some other movies with my career. So, of course, we all know how that turned out. The next movie he would go on to do was a remake of reimagining, apparently, of Halloween that most fans are split on, that some like it, and some really hate it, or just don't like it, such as me anyways. I don't hate this movie as much as the next movie Rob did, which would be a sequel to his Halloween reimagining, which was just horribly edited garbage. That was barely even a Halloween movie. It made Michael look like some blonde-bearded, trashy redneck that growls when he stabs people. Like, I get you try to make Michael intimidating, but I feel like they did that better. Rob Zombie almost did that a little better in the first Halloween reboot because at least Michael was somewhat intimidating in that movie. He actually still looked like himself, but moving on to his next movies he did an animated movie same year as Halloween 2, like Haunted World of El Sorprebisto. I haven't seen that movie, guys, so I can't really say anything about it. Then he would go back to live action again and do The Lords of Salem, except not give the next movies wide releases. Which would make sense because he hated filming both Halloween 1 and 2 and considered the production of both those a nightmare. Lords of Salem, I think of all the films he did after Rejects, was probably his most I think it's as tolerable. Not really great, but I think I'd watched over most of the other stuff he did after Rejects. And 31 I did not like whatsoever. And then of course, 2018, Rob decided 14 years late. Yeah, 14 years way too late, and when Sid Haig was in very poor health, to say, oh, I know what I'll do. I want to win my fans back. I'll go make an unnecessary third installment in my Firefly Family series. I remember those characters. I'll just make a third one. Way too late. At the last minute. So we got what is, of course, none other than this fan-made sheep crap. Just why? Rejects had a good sound to the characters. There's a time they should have just died there. No, this movie did not like this movie. It was basically just a cheap version of Devil's Rejects. Take Captain Spaulding out, but which at least makes sense because Captain Spaulding's in poor health, and he sadly would eventually pass away just after this movie came out, so that's that. And plus, have the first half of the movie be bloody news reports, and when you do get to the gore, like in the middle of the movie, when the actual movie really fully does start, have the gore be cheap, kills you already know are coming, and just rehash some of the same scenes from Rejects. Again, just with different hostages, or different victims, or different rivals they have to face. And instead turn into some random Mexico battle at the end. Make the movie feel too comedic to even be considered a Firefly movie. Like, I don't know. This is a major example when a character should stay dead. Okay, moving on. This is kind of getting a little too long, so let's just move on to the other ones. I'm going to try to make the other ones a little quicker, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, number 10, Aliens. Yes. Honestly, this should have only just been a 2-movie series because I really liked how the first one was more horror. This one goes more action. You have Ripley finding these other survivors, and they all team up to take down a new clan of aliens led by the Alien Queen. Very epic action scenes. I love how kind of Ripley gets a chance at a new daughter with Newt. And it gets some great other interesting characters too, like, yeah, and it pretty much ends with them going hypersleep, returning to Earth. It was a perfect way to end Ripley's story, and a perfect way to end Alien. And then, of course, but we all know since this got critical acclaim and made money at the box office, a third one was coming. So let's do this. How are we gonna start this? Okay, let's kill off Newt. Let's kill off every other survivor of aliens except for Ripley. Throw her into a prison. Some reason, let's just get rid of the greatest characters from Aliens. Yeah. Well, to be fair, poor David Fincher actually had a vision for Alien 3, and then Fox went and they screwed it. Like, David Fincher doesn't even like this movie. It clearly shows that after they kept butchering Vision, he didn't even care about this movie. He didn't want to make it anymore. And so he pretty much disowned the project to this day. But then would there be a director's cut available, which was slightly better, but still not good. But I think even David Fincher would agree with me if he says, because Alien and Alien should be the only Aliens movies that exist. That's that. Alright, number 9. This may be a controversial one because, well, I don't mind its first sequel that much, but RoboCop. Now, okay, I don't mind RoboCop 2, but I've grown to kind of appreciate over time, but I kind of agree that RoboCop should have just stayed a standalone movie because RoboCop is a phenomenal classic. Paul Verhoeven's greatest work along with Total Recall and Basic Instinct. A great performance of Peter Weller, perfect gory action scenes, and some very entertaining humorous moments. 2. Just absolutely love this movie. It's great from start to finish. Then we got RoboCop 2, which was just... It was fine, I mean, not really good as the first one, but it really undid the great ending of the first one when Murphy regained his humanity at the very end of the movie. And then RoboCop 3 was just absolute shitty garbage that I don't want to speak of. Pretty much as bad as Texas Chainsaw The Next Generation, I will say that. But RoboCop 2's bad qualities were that it basically undid Murphy regaining his humanity, suddenly made the old man the main antagonist, even though he's just kind of really a perfect supporting character in the first one. I kind of wish they just kept him that way. And of course made this random child villain in Hobbs, or I think his name's Hobbs, who was played by none other than Littlefoot's voice actor in The Land Before Time. So yeah, honestly, it was kind of just really made for the money, really. Like, the studio only demanded the sequels. Paul Verhoeven didn't even want to make any sequels to this movie because, well, some can argue that the ending of RoboCop's a cliffhanger, though. We kind of need another one. Yeah, it's a cliffhanger, but it's a cliffhanger that may feel abrupt, but it beautifully, beautifully wraps up the story. Murphy had shot Dick Jones. He had slowly regained his humanity. He walked out the door. He said his name was Murphy. He pretty much regained his humanity again. It was a perfect way to end the story. They're abrupt, but very beautiful. The only thing we needed to just end the story. No, like, emotional, like, sad aftermath. Like, he just kills the final antagonist, puts his gun away, and he just walks out to continue his police work. It's a beautiful ending. I mean, I really wish we didn't really get any sequels or even a PG-13 remake. I don't really hate the PG-13 remake either, but like I said, reason why I really wish it were not a PG-13 movie. That's all I'm going to say. Alright. Number 8 would have to be Independence Day. This is a pretty big obvious one. So, how is this going to happen? So, of course, we all knew Independence Day was released and was more mixed received by critics, but now it's a little better received by critics, but it was kind of liked by audiences. Time, and it made over $800 million worldwide. Something a movie back then never made, or was impossible to make. Unless there were just re-releases every time. So, of course, we all knew that even for the people who saw it the minute it came out, a sequel would obviously now be coming. Even though this movie beautifully, like RoboCop, beautifully ended, the aliens were dead, they had won, like it probably has one of the best sacrifices in movie history, where Russell drives up to the alien beam and says, "Hello, boys, I'm back," and he just crashed into the alien ship. It's a perfect way to kill the aliens. They win the fight because of that. It's just a beautiful scene. Much better than the attempted sacrifice garbage from The Last Jedi that ruined the scene. But of course, there was so much development hell with the sequel, and eventually it was finally released around the time when Will Smith couldn't even come back. Well, I don't think he even wanted to come back, because so we got Independence Day Resurgence, released 20 years way too late. This is another definition with sequels. Sometimes they're released way too late when people just don't care anymore, and are just saying, you had your shot, please don't make this too late when we just don't care anymore, you already had your shot, you should have made this earlier. Yeah, that movie was, of course, Independence Day Resurgence. Oh, God. Thankfully, this movie bombed at the box office because it was unnecessary. The first one ended perfectly fine. The aliens were dead, we didn't need another trope coming in, and we just get rid of all the supporting characters. I mean, all the great characters from the first one, replace them with crap younger, stereotypical teenagers now that we don't even know or have a connection with, or just their kids from the first one now all grown up as adults, take it on the threat themselves. So yeah, and let's just, our dedication to Russell, the pilot who sacrificed himself at the end of the first movie, just like have a brick named after him. A brick. That was your dedication to him? Really? Of all the reasons. No. Like, seriously, I didn't even... I could tell this movie was going to be pretty bad as soon as I heard it was announced, because this movie really was not sequel worthy. Just because it made money doesn't mean it needed a sequel. Like, it was a perfect, just a one movie alone, and a lot of these are going to be one movie alone films, because some of these were just made for money. That's what I'm going to say about that. Alright, let's move on. Number 7 would have to be Cabin Fever. Yes, guys, I said it best, and I've said it many times. This is the only movie in the series I like. I don't even think Eli Roth intended this movie to be a franchise. Just one little flesh-eating virus movie, and that's really it. Just to launch his film career as a film director. And it didn't really end on a sequel setup. I mean, yeah, that flesh-eating virus was going to spread everywhere, but not all horror movies with downer endings mean suddenly, oh hey, time for a sequel because it ended on a bad note. There's a lot of downer ending horror movies that don't even get sequels. But somehow, Lionsgate thought it'd be a great idea to make a sequel to this, even though $30 million on a $1 million budget doesn't exactly always mean it's that profitable to make it a franchise. And thankfully, all the movies were released direct to DVD, so at least that's a bonus. But, yeah, technically there's only one sequel to this, and then one prequel, and one god-awful remake. Because Cabin Fever 2 Spring Fever barely qualifies as a sequel to me because it barely has anything to do with the first one. Patient Zero also barely has anything to do with the first one, but it's slightly watchable. The remake is not a sequel, and should not be mentioned. Ever. So yeah, Cabin Fever would be number 7. Alright, number 6. This is one big coming one. The Exorcist. Well, oh my god. This is notoriously mentioned all the time whenever I think of bad sequels. The Exorcist, like many on this list, was a good standalone movie. It was one of the most well-known horror films of pop culture. One of the most notorious of the 1970s. It was notorious with audiences and made them throw up, and it made so much money. It was that successful for a horror movie. And it's even gone on for so many re-releases and made even more money. And now it's over $400 million worldwide. So of course, eventually, William Friedkin didn't direct a sequel, but a sequel still got made without his involvement, except there's a problem. This sequel was made by people who had never saw the first one. No one. It was Exorcist II: The Heretic. probably the #1 worst horror sequel ever made in existence. Okay, like Hellhound says, the less said about this movie, the better. We're going on to #5, because this is just a travesty sequel. Alright, #5 is not a horror movie. We are back to the action movies. Yeah, here it is. And this is another obvious one. Speed, starring Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Okay. There's a reason Jan de Bont said Speed was only going to be... I only want to do Speed as one movie, and I don't want to make it a franchise. There's a reason for words like that. Like, this is one of those, Speed was a film released in 1994. It's one of those Die Hard ripoffs. Constant movies that tried to cash in on Die Hard. And this was probably the only real one that really worked very well among people. Like, critics love this movie. Audiences even love this movie. I love this movie. I consider one of Keanu Reeves' best roles. It's basically about this cop that's trying to stop... who has to help this passenger stop this bus from going... free these hostages from a speeding bus at more than 50 miles per hour, or this bomb on it is going to explode if it ever slows down. So it's being controlled by this terrorist played by late actor Dennis Hopper, who is, by the way, guys from Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. And Land of the Dead. May he rest in peace. And of course also in that terrible Super Mario Brothers movie. So yeah. It's a very phenomenal movie, best of the Die Hard ripoffs. But since it made $350 million worldwide, Fox went and they decided to force Jan de Bont to make a sequel against his own will. Keanu Reeves even saw the script and said, "What the fuck is this? I'm not doing this shit. No. I'm out." So yeah, they instead put his character on the bus, made it look like that only Sandra Bullock came back, and it made it look like that only Annie and Jack actually broke up, just so they could still make that sequel. But even that doesn't civil the fans, because even fans pretend this movie sequel that's known as this, Speed 2, Cruise Control, does not exist. Nor should it ever even have been to begin with. Because, hey, let's just take the first movie, set it on a cruise boat, have the cruise boat go fast, which is so dumb and ridiculous, because cruise boats usually go like... they're slow, guys. That's the dumbest thing to do. Set it on a boat. And make it PG-13. Get rid of all the R-rated stuff. Let's make it PG-13 so nothing great even happens. Make the movie way too boringly long at 2 hours. Like, anyone wants to sit through a bad sequel like this that runs over 2 hours long. And just take out everything great about this first one. No Keanu Reeves. Annie is now an annoying character. So there's that. So in short, yeah, one of the worst sequels ever. Alright, #4. This is going to be another controversial one. Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Yes, this is technically a sequel, but it's a sequel that can also somewhat work as a standalone movie. In kind of a way. The first one is just probably considered to me the best Terminator movie. Yes, the first one's also a masterpiece, but this movie is far more memorable, does everything better than the first one. Like, you know about the T-800 more, they humanized the T-800 a little more, I really like that. Edward Furlong as John Connor gives a very good performance. Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor is even better this time than she was in the first. And let's not forget one of the greatest villains in cinema, the T-1000, played by Robert Patrick. A great and intimidating villain ever. Probably the best villain of the Terminator franchise. And this was actually also a sequel. I'm glad they did not just try to set up a third film with this sequel. They concluded the story beautifully well. At the end of this one, even James Cameron said that he only wanted to make like Terminator a two-parter story. So in a way, this could be kind of like the epilogue of the first film, just set years later. In a way. So yeah. It's pretty much like that. Like the end of this movie, Skynet is destroyed, the T-800 beautifully destroys himself in a very heartbreaking scene at the end. And of course, with that, the future is saved, Judgment Day has stopped, and that's the end. Well, until 12 years later, when Hollywood teamed up with Warner Brothers, and then decided to ruin this ending with more sequels. And it all started with Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, which to me is probably the most okay of the sequels, really, of the sequels after Terminator 2. And then they got Terminator Salvation. Maybe don't look at it as a sequel, just more of a separate movie, really. And I think it's a little bit better. Don't overlook it as a Terminator movie. And then they got Terminator Gen Shit, which is literally just a damn remake. And let's not forget 2019's Terminator Dark Fate, which I saw in the theaters. I've never saw it again because I thought that movie was also garbage. Even Terminator Rise of the Machines felt like a better third installment than this, because at least it had John Connor. And instead, here's what happened. Dark Fate. Let's kill John Connor. Make Terminator 2 pointless. Ruin your movie quick. That's what it is. That's what it's like. But anyways, so yeah. But there was one good thing about Dark Woke, is at least Sarah Connor comes back, but she doesn't really do much. And he got T-800 coming back, but even he doesn't do much, and he's only like the movie near the very end. So we get this new protector who needs meds to stay fucking alive. Yeah, needs medication to survive. What great protector that is. And this new chick that we don't know. So yeah, this movie's called Terminator Dark Woke, and I've never rewatched it, and I don't think I want to watch it again. Alright, on to number 3. Number 3 would have to be, I reviewed this whole trilogy last week, The Hangover. A hilarious comedy movie. One of my favorite comedies of all time. Yeah. Very popular. When this movie came out, it was very popular in 2009. It made so much money at the box office, made over $467 million worldwide on a $35 million budget. So of course we all knew that would mean a sequel. 2 sequels even. And of course both sequels sucked. Hangover Part 2 is just a lazy rehash of the first one. Just set in Bangkok, even more vulgar. Yeah. All the good stuff of the first one taken out. Have the characters be unlikable. And there you go. That's pretty much Part 2 is. And then they got Part 3, which is absolutely worse, because it barely feels like a comedy, and it feels more like some dark thriller, directed by an angry 13-year-old. Where we start the movie, where it's pretty much started with the decapitating of a giraffe at a bridge. Yeah. As your opening scene, as your opening to your main character, Alan. So, yeah, like, I used to like Part 2 more than the first one when I was younger, but as I get older and older and I rewatch it, I can see why people hate it. Because it's basically the first one. Again. Just more vulgar and set in a dirtier place. Like Bangkok. They just set in Bangkok. Instead of Las Vegas. Las Vegas was a much more funnier location. Bangkok isn't really comedy material. That's all I'm going to say. Alright, and number 2, second place. We're getting on to the big stuff now. Taken, a major example of the action. Much same thing as The Hangover. 1 great first installment, and 2 awful sequels. These are major examples. This is definitely a notorious example of why some movies should just never, ever have a sequel. And this would definitely have to be one of them. This movie came out it was mixed received by critics at a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences really enjoyed it. They considered it one of Liam Neeson's greatest movies in a long time, probably his best role in a long time, and definitely redefined Liam Neeson as an action star. And honestly, of the versions I prefer this movie, I prefer the extended cut. The extended cut's the true version to watch if you want a really good movie. I have a feeling if we had released the extended cut instead of a PG-13 cut, maybe this movie would have actually gotten critical acclaim from critics. It probably wouldn't have gotten a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. Because this movie, the extended cut, is the only version that exists, to me. It's much more brutal, and it's much more entertaining, and it's a very satisfying ending, too. Like, the ending of this movie isn't even a sequel setup. It wraps the story well, but nope. Since this movie was well received by audiences, and actually still also made money at the box office, beat its budget at the box office very well, over domestically and worldwide, of course Fox would go make sequels. And they had the same problems as the Hangover sequels. Taken 2 and Hangover 2 are both similar. Because 1, they're both rehashes of their predecessors, set in different locations, and and Taken 2 has a different hostage situation, where it's his wife kidnapped, this time. By the same bad guys from the first film who want revenge for the events of the first film, and even he gets kidnapped, so his daughter now has to rescue both of them. Which is what the hell? I would not buy something like that. I mean, I did watch this movie when it first came out, didn't like it, and you can tell why, as I'm mentioning this, because it's just the first one. I think first watch even bored me to sleep, because barely anything intense happens in this. Like, the second one feels so toned down. No, really, they toned down the second one so much. Like, even the PG-13 version of the first one, felt more violent than any version of this movie. So yeah, all Taken 2 is just the first one, different hostage situation, different location, and same villains as the first. And then he got Taken 3, which is even damn worse, which I saw in the theaters. And it's just a bloody disgrace, because it's not a Taken movie. Just Liam Neeson running around town. You can watch this as like an unintentional comedy where it's just Liam Neeson running around his own town, punching random bad guys he sees. After he's framed for the death of Lenore, of his own wife, which now may Taken 2 even more pointless, which is, I don't think I really care about that, but yeah, but it's still pointless to just randomly kill off his own wife, who was never supposed to be a big contributor to the story in the first place. Even so. So in short, Taken, like Hangover and Speed, should just stay one movie, and one movie alone. Alright, before we get to our number 1 pick, which I think some of you are knowing is coming, let's get on with our dishonorable mentions. Okay, first dishonorable mention, Basic Instinct. Ugh. Why would you make a sequel to this? I mean, the first one by Paul Verhoeven, a masterpiece. Just a one movie alone. The Basic Instinct 2 sucks. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with me on that. Well, at least I hope people don't argue with me on that one. So yeah, it's just crap. Basic Instinct 2 I just avoid. It's just a crap movie. Alright. This is going to be a controversial pick again, guys. So don't mind me on this one, please. Hostel. Yes, I know. Like, some are like, but I love Part 2. Why would you put this on the list? Well, for me personally, I think this one's kind of the only really best one. Also, Part 2 has its moments, but like Taken 2 and Hangover Part 2, it just redoes the first one. And this time your main characters, this time the first one with women as the main hostage characters, or the backpackers this time. And have them going on an art trip, instead of just to party and have sex, like they did in the first one. I mean, the first one didn't even end on any sequel setup either. Like, if you didn't make a sequel, I think Hostel probably would be regarded as like actually pretty deep, as like kind of a classic in the torture genre. But no. Since the movie made $80 million worldwide on a $4 million budget, we all know what it meant. Time for another movie. So when we got Hostel Part 2, which just rehashed the first one, and basically I don't think hardly made any money back, or made that much money back really, and pretty much led to a direct-to-DVD third one, which absolutely sucked. But also Part 2 is actually just an okay movie, really. I mean, first one is way better. I'd rather just watch the first one instead. Alright, Dumb and Dumber. Yet another release, next as I'll mention, is yet another 20 years too late released movie. Just bring back Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey. 20 years way too late. Instead of just the first one was a hilarious movie, probably the Farrelly Brothers' best work. And definitely one of Jim Carrey's best roles. But of course, 200 million worldwide at the box office or something like that. A sequel was guaranteed, but instead of a sequel, we got a prequel called Dumb and Dumberer, When Harry Met Lloyd, which was just unspeakable. And then we got a real sequel, Dumb and Dumber 2, which also was terrible. It was unnecessary. Like, this movie was just pure cash grab, only made to make a buck, make quick buck at the box office. They should have just re-released the first one in 4K. Would have been better than just making a 20 years way too damn late sequel. Or if they wanted to make a sequel, they should have just released it in the 90s or when the first one was still relevant. And now, our final dishonorable mention, Jaws. This is an obvious one for anybody. Like, Jaws only works as a standalone movie. The shark died at the end of the first one. But no, Universal went behind Spielberg's back and made 3 more sequels. You have Jaws 2, which was just, had some moments, but still wasn't good. Jaws 3D, what the hell? And then they got Jaws the Revenge. Ugh, God, just like Exorcist 2, just the less said about that movie, the better. Alright, now, for the number 1 movie that never, ever should have had a sequel, Star Wars, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. This was an obvious one going to number 1. Here's what Return of the Jedi ended with. Emperor Palpatine dead, Vader returned to the light side, he became Anakin Skywalker again, he killed Palpatine, saved his son, destroyed the Empire for good, fulfilling the prophecy set in the prequels, and he died in Luke's arms, getting to see Luke's face, finally dying at peace, and can finally be with the Jedi, redeeming himself. Beautiful ending to the saga. Great one. But of course, then the assholes at Disney bought the franchise in 2012, and they went and we got a shitty Disney fanfic trilogy that consisted of The Force Awakens, which I used to like the first time it came out, but more and more and more I rewatched it, I realized what just a carbon copy remake of A New Hope it was, just with different new younger generation characters. Have the original trilogy characters come back, albeit separated from each other, and hardly contributing much to any of the trilogy's plot. I mean, Force Awakens is probably the best of these 3 movies, but it's not saying much. I'm gonna give it that. So you have, basically, undo every bit of sacrifice in the original trilogy, have Vader's redemption be completely ruined, have a brand new order, like, have this crap thing called the First Order, which makes no sense. And there you go. You got a trilogy that had no planning. And unfortunately it would get worse each movie, because then you had Force Awakens would get 2 follow-ups that Last Jedi I was actually really, really hyped for, and this movie made me realize I should be careful on how much I hype movies, because Last Jedi turned out to be an absolute dog shit sequel. Probably the worst Star Wars movie ever made. Like, I didn't mind it at first, but then but once I rewatched it, I realized what everyone was talking about, and then I hated it. Like, it's just the worst Star Wars movie ever made. Just make Luke this grumpy old jerk hermit who drinks alien titty milk. Refuses to do one thing to help the First Order, and when he does, he just uses a projector version of himself and then somehow dies after using it. Yeah, great way to send off a childhood icon. And it got Rise of Skywalker, which I hated the first time I saw it. Maybe slightly better than Last Jedi, but it was still garbage, it was still awful, there was no way I would ever want to call this the end of Star Wars. This movie alone is the true and only end to Star Wars, and it should have stayed that way. That's that. Alright, that's it for this list. that'll be it for this video, too. Thank y'all for watching. If you liked this and want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.